Before I dive in, one of the things I wanted to remind you is if you have if you're going to be leaving us early. I feel like 2001 is about to start. Do we want to turn off my lav mic? Is that what's causing the problem? Okay. All right. If you're going to be leaving us at all early today, a reminder, please drop off your evaluation forms as you leave. There's a box at the table as you exit. And I'll remind you 3 or 4 more times of that today. Before I dive into to this topic, what I wanted to do was put some framework around it that I'm going to focus almost entirely on editorial challenges and opportunities. That is, the things that journal editors have, rather than other possible uses of artificial intelligence. And I'm going to do that because we've run a workshop that some of the organizations in the room attended. I'm going to report on the results of that workshop, but that's the evidence we have for certain things that we're going to do in artificial intelligence. Second comment is that I'm not going to be very religious about artificial intelligence versus big data versus decision support. What we found is that editors want help in certain areas, and they have a sense that the old technology of databases and text mining or whatever are not the way to do it. There are other ways to do it, and so they pointed at certain problems, and it was up to us technical folks to figure out whether machine learning was the approach or whether big data was an approach, or combinations. So I'm not going to be religious about that and talk about, well, here's the definition of AI and so on. So how we got into this was that about 2 years ago, AI zoomed onto the agenda for scholarly publishing with this press release. Some of you might have seen it, gone like this. That's an Italian gesture. And what was really a problem in it was, this is a press release from Meta. It basically people inferred from it that the goal of this company, Meta, was to replace editors with artificial intelligence because, after all, it could do better than editors could. And that made us wonder first at what was Meta really up to, and second, whether they were well enough informed about what editors actually needed help with as opposed to being replaced. So we felt that it would be good to get away from talking about disruption of the editorial process and talk about how to actually help with the process. So rather than thinking about replacing editors or doing better than editors, we thought we should be talking to editors about what they actually wanted help with. This meant that we had to talk to the editors themselves. We didn't need to talk to graduate students or postdocs, the kind of people that we often do research interviews with. We didn't need to, in a way, to talk just with publishers, because while publishers run the systems and the processes, it's the editors who are actually looking at the decisions that have to be made. And we certainly didn't need to talk to ourselves at HighWire, since we don't run journals. Inside Meta, there were many people who had written scholarly papers and published results, but as far as we could find, none of them had actually been editors on journals. So what we did was put together a workshop. Now, many of you in the room got a personal invitation from me to participate in the workshop. All of our customer base got an invitation through a posting on the community forum. And the idea was to have a group get together of both editors and publishers. Not just editors, not just publishers, but essentially the ground rules were, we'd like you to come if you could come as a team, an editor and a publisher. We worked with our partners on this 2-day workshop with Meta on the first day of the workshop and with Google on the second day of the workshop. There are 3 organizations in this room who were at the workshop, EMBO, Company of Biologists, and the BMJ. Claire Rawlinson, who attended the workshop, will have comments, provide her comments on the workshop following my remarks. What we did in this workshop was ask the publishers, day 1 of the workshop, we asked people to think about the editorial workflow, and we structured it into 4 parts, not because there are only 4 parts, but because 4 was a good number of segments to work with in the workshop format. That was the first day. The second day we focused on specific editorial problems that the editors had ranked as what they wanted to discuss. I'll report on the second day of the workshop in the second part of this presentation. Now, the thing that was really important to us was that everybody who was invited participate. We didn't want to just hear from the good talkers in the room, which if you had set up a theater-style room with 40 people in it, 10 of the people would have done 80% of the talking. You know that probably from your own editorial board meetings. So what we did was arrange it as a large O-shaped table, everyone seated around the table, and the different 15 different groups were seated together. So the folks from the BMJ were sitting next to each other. And that way we went around the table for each of the 4 topics and had people comment. And sometimes you would get agreement between 2 or 3 people from one organization, and sometimes get disagreement. But we also encouraged people in the group to essentially to ditto what a previous person had said. So it didn't go too slowly, it went a little slowly. But we could detect when there was quick agreement about a point someone had made, and that was important to sort of get enough results. The group met at Stanford because it was January, and because editors usually had colleagues in the San Francisco Bay Area, or they were from somewhere on the West Coast, and because Meta and Google were there. If we do future workshops in this format about these topics, it could possibly be at other places. What we did seem to find was that January was a good time in terms of hitting conflicts that people had. Most people, I think only one of the people couldn't make it at this time in January. So what did we hear? Let me report on the results of the meeting. What we heard from one of the attendees, which got agreement from everyone, was that there was entirely too much religious debate going on. That is not evidence-based debate around editorial boards. And so one of the people in the room basically said what she'd really like from artificial intelligence is to make long meetings shorter. Everyone agreed, and the thought was, the idealistic thought was that if we could bring data to the table, we would get through decisions more quickly. I'm not sure that would actually be the case. What I've seen is that people then argue about the data rather than whatever religious opinion they have. But everybody agreed that this outcome would be great. But the more actionable results that came out of the workshop were in these 4 areas. I'm going to drill down on each of these, giving one or two examples for each. And these are not by any means the only suggestions that we got. Over the 2-day meeting, I took 18 pages of notes. Eric summarized the meeting into a 10-page document, which is actually, it sounds long, but it was that much going on in the 2 days. So what I want to go on to do is describe what the editors told us were the areas where they would like to see solutions. I will comment that I think some of these areas AI is able to address much more quickly than others. Some where we already have seen solutions, they may be narrow solutions rather than broad, very targeted to a particular knowledge domain or a particular part of an editorial process. So there are some that are much advanced over others at this time. The first area was in journal performance, and this was pretty specific actually. What we took away was that people were interested in visualizing, if you will, their journal's internal performance, but their journal's contextual performance as well. And the internal performance kinds of things we're already doing pretty well on with tools like Impact Visor, which is not AI, it's more a database, sometimes big data type of solution. But what people wanted to see was, in terms of the context, they wanted to see their performance relative to other journals' performance. And so if you're a business person, you'd say, oh, they want to see their market share and whether they're getting an increasing share of market or not. But the key thing was that the current tools that do things like this, so Isi Rankings came out, I think it was yesterday, and it will tell you whether your journal is number 3 in a particular field or number 5, whether it's gone from 5 to 4, and so on. That isn't what they were talking about in terms of context. They wanted not only more rapid context than once a year getting what ISI thinks, and they wanted visualizations, not just numbers, that they wanted to be able to see rates of change over time. They wanted to be able to target at a micro level. In other words, not look at a whole journal, but look at a particular topic within a journal. And these could be very tightly focused. So you think of a journal like Genetics, which publishes on a broad number of topics. The editor might want to track 5 of those topics and see whether his market share is increasing or decreasing over time. And we have some ideas about how to visualize that, but we have done a prototype of it, but have not decided yet to build the tool. So what was key here is essentially going below the full journal level and doing it in a timely way. So this is an example of one approach to this. Meta has brought out a publisher dashboard. All the people who attended the meeting, all the publishers who attended the meeting were invited to take a look at their publisher dashboard in Meta. If you're interested in this, send me an email. I can connect you with the appropriate people in Meta. What's shown here is version 1, which a lot of you gave comments on, and Meta is preparing a version 2 now. Key difference between version 1 and version 2 is version 1 was limited to a 3-month rolling window. Everybody said that it makes no sense, that's inadequate, and so they've made it variable from, I think, 3 months to a year, where you can look at relative performance. It helps assess superstar papers. You can see real-time feedback on Meta's prediction of a journal, a particular article's performance, as well as a journal's performance. and you can evaluate subject kinds of trends. We have additional ideas, and I'd be glad to share those with you, but essentially market share was what people wanted to understand better in terms of journal performance. This came up with a particular publisher who had seen a decline in their submission rate, and a number of you in the room have also. So what they wanted to do was see their instinct. Their editors believed that this happened because of PLOS One. And what we could show them by visualizing their market share in the prototype we built was essentially their market share started declining about 4 years before PLOS One really expanded, which told them us and them that the problem was somewhere else. PLOS One had accelerated it by being so successful, but it wasn't the cause of it. Then we could turn around and instead of looking at journal market share, we could look at topic market share and see that their market share in particular topics was declining, and which topics that was. We could also see at a macro level whether certain topics overall were declining. And is that what the journal, if the journal was publishing primarily in declining topics, you could imagine what the result would be for your overall market share. The second major area was one that we called community engagement. And this had a number of different expressions. And I'll tell you right now that this was probably the area where I think AI is going to have real difficulty helping with, in part because if you talk to 20 editors about how they attract and retain authors, you will get at least 20 different answers, which makes it really hard for those of us in the technology business to do things for them. A specific use case that has come up in this meeting and in other meetings was attending meetings. That is, attending specialized subject conferences or large subject conferences, and not only knowing who the people are you should be meeting with. If you're a recruiting editor or an editor who has an assignment to get more papers in a particular area, who to meet with and what to talk to them about. The interesting thing that was obvious after talking with a different group of editors is that many scientists are not the kind of people who just walk up to somebody and introduce themselves and talk about what they want from them. Essentially, that's a socially challenging situation. Those of you who work in marketing and sales wonder, what's the problem? I do that every day, all day. But in fact, editors were telling us that this was not their preferred mode. So what we thought about is what could we provide to an editor that would make it essentially a discussion about their science. So inform me enough about someone that I'm going to go talk to them as a scientist rather than as a recruiting editor. So that became one of the ideas that came out of this, but it's actually pretty difficult to implement. So I think this is the area where you'll see only a little happening in the short term. So one of the things that came up is to use preprint servers as a way of engaging a community. In other words, someone has posted a paper into a preprint server, talk to them about that paper. That becomes more a scientist discussion rather than a journal editor discussion. And so the idea was to develop essentially tools for prospecting in the stream of preprints. And we think this is pretty achievable. There are already journals that are doing this by hand. I think one of the Nature journals is prospecting in a bioarchive, and it's challenging to do by hand. we certainly heard from people that, you know, putting a preprint into a preprint server, if then as the author you get 10 solicitations to publish that paper, that may be an unfortunate thing. I mean, you'll feel wanted, but you'll also feel overwhelmed. So we think there probably are ways that we can help editors identify, and especially if you think, okay, bioRxiv right now I can do this by hand, but imagine that it grows by an order of magnitude in a year and then another order of magnitude another year. It will probably become, essentially look like the literature itself. So we have to get the tools ready for that. Now the next area that we want to report results in is seeing over the horizon. A lot of tools are good now at telling you what the situation is today. But predicting the situation for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years is still very challenging and is exactly the kind of thing that AI is good at. And what editors told us over and over again is that they could really use help here, because this would tell them what areas perhaps to add an associate editor or editorial board members in, what areas to be mining for papers, where you needed to build up a set of reviewers who could look into papers, what conferences to attend in these emerging areas. So the whole idea of emerging topics, emerging authors was very attractive. And Meta has a tool that does this. It's called Horizon Scanning. It's a very sophisticated tool, and unfortunately it's not very scalable. That is, as we used to say, you run this tool in Palo Alto and the lights dim in the San Francisco Peninsula. It's a massive computational challenge to do this. So we've talked with Meta about something that is scaled down a bit, and we're running an experiment with one of the journals that participated in the meeting to try, and this is really an experiment, to see if we could buy, this is a journal that has about 20 associate editors. We worked with a dozen of them to profile their areas, and then to predict within those areas, each of those areas, what are the emerging topics. We've just finished the calculations. Sometime in July, we're going to present the results to just a few editors, get feedback, and if the feedback is good, we'll present it to the rest of the editors in August and September. So more on that later if it's successful. If you're interested in this for your own editorial group, drop me a line and I'll keep you well informed about how we proceed. The results look interesting, but unfortunately none of us in Meta and HighWire can qualify them scientifically to say that they're useful and important results. So we're at the stage now where we've gathered the data and run the results, and now it's time to present the information. The fourth area of the four from day one is essentially helping with efficiency. This is, the kinds of repetitive tasks that happen over and over again and are not now automated. And especially the ones that burn editorial expertise, where somebody in a field has to do an evaluation. This might be somebody who does statistical review, evaluations of methodologies in a paper, but it could also be things as simple as looking to see that a checklist that has been filled out is accurately filled out on submissions. Image integrity evaluation, this is one where we thought years ago that machines would provide really good results. and in fact what they did was create a huge burden in editorial groups to look at the results from the machine evaluations. And now finally we're seeing AIs provide data here. In fact, there was a paper about 2 weeks ago in bioRxiv about exactly this. Meta has some tools in this area. I don't know whether they will take off. They do things like help you figure out what areas a paper is slotted in, so you might know which editors to assign it to, and be able to look at whether it's a good match for your journal, recommend reviewers, identify whether it's likely a high-impact paper, and if you're in a publishing group that's doing transfers, which other journals might it be transferred to if you're rejecting it. This is an example of looking at a list of transfer possibilities. Meta has this. There are several other parties that are also providing essentially journal selection tools. There's a tool called Stat Reviewer, which is pretty well getting established within social sciences, and some people want to now try it in biomedical. I think that's a good idea. And classification of articles into subject areas. This came up in one of the breakout sessions yesterday. A company called Unsilo does this, has what I think is the first decent user interface for doing this. So I think that's through the first day. The second day of the workshop, I'm going to go through this more quickly. We focused on 4 challenges that editors told us they wanted to discuss. Community engagement was one. In a way, I've already talked about some of the results here from day one. The same problems and solutions were discussed, but in a more general context, not just talking about technology, but talking about, all right, how do you incentivize prospective authors to become real authors? How do you deal with lapsed authors? How do you identify people who are now left you and are now starting to publish somewhere else? And this is all technologically possible. Second was talking about adverse submission trends. In other words, getting declining submissions. We found is that people really have trouble talking about this in a large group. It's almost like you're talking about some social disease you have, and yet people did talk, and we found that there were no clearly common things. In fact, there was one publisher, I believe they were talking about the results of 4 or 5 journals, and some had seen increases in submissions, some had seen declines in submissions, and they had applied a common process for attracting and retaining authors across all of them. So some of it might be just very field specific. One of the things that was interesting that Google commented on is how the effect of seeing a journal's name in a list of search results is an advertisement for the journal. And so to some degree, the volume of publishing that you do can have an effect. Every paper that appears in a search result is an ad, essentially, for your journal. And now you could say, well, of course, Google thinks of everything as advertising. But it was an interesting comment and suggested that if you increase the volume of your publishing, you will see an increase in submissions, and indeed at least one publisher had tried this and done it. This is a really interesting chart presented by Mark Johnston, the editor-in-chief of Genetics, who was looking at decline in submission in many society-sponsored journals. And this is a 20-year view from 97 to 2017. And basically the bottom line here is that the branded journal suites, primarily Nature and Cell, had intervened in the marketplace over this 20 years and had essentially pushed down the society-sponsored journals in the journal pecking order. And so the one question was, how do we counteract this? And these journals have gotten very good at doing internal transfers and retaining articles within the journal suite. And you'll hear from Bernd Pulver today about one of the activities he and some colleagues have done in this area of transfers across different society and sponsored journals. And then finally, decision support was a real challenging topic, perhaps one that we should return to. And the issue here was that the data there's plenty of data, but the problem is it's all over the place. It requires some analytical expertise to get at it. And so one of the possibilities is that we work with some publishers to pull data together using tools like Google's Data Studio and create some prototypes. There are two HighWire publishers who are already working on this area, and if there are some common possibilities, we then show them to others and see if others want to implement similar dashboards. I was off by a slide, sorry. Claire, do you want to come on up and...
Thanks, John. So I'll keep this brief. So I attended the workshop with Dr. Jose Marino, who's the deputy editor of the BMJ, football coach. And the workshop was a really fun, interactive 2 days and a really great opportunity to sit in a room with other editors and other publishers and just find it really reassuring that, you know, you're all facing the same sort of challenges. So I'd really recommend going along to a future one of these workshops. So just a couple of observations from the day. The first thing that struck me was that how many editors actually they requested information that wasn't AI. So the workshop was about AI, but they wanted tools that are already available. So for example, my editor didn't know that we could track where our rejected articles go as we can in ImpactVisor. So it kind of made me realise that, you know, we as publishers, we probably need to do a bit better at kind of communicating what already is out there. And I guess as a secondary point to that, picking up something that John said in a discussion that we had yesterday about having the time to analyse all this data. We have all these swathes of data now, so, you know, how do we ensure that data analysis becomes part of job roles? How do we get the resource for that? You know, maybe we need AI that can actually write the report and chair the meeting that you're having as well. The second thing I wanted to just pick up was the preprints. They are a great source of publishing potential papers, but as John said, you know, it's great if Nature come and knock on the door and say submit your article, but if all of a sudden you get 100 of these emails from people, it very quickly becomes spam. So just, you know, really consider how you take that forward. Don't automate, have a personal touch. And then the most interesting thing from my personal perspective, the discussions were around the philosophy of training AI and programming these algorithms, because we know that our biases, both conscious and unconscious, affect our choice of things such as editorial board members, peer reviewers, what articles to accept, you know, based on things like gender or perceived prestige. And you know, we know that that's not always a good thing, so how do we train the AI algorithms so that they don't perpetuate these unconscious biases that we have? So I don't know the answer to that. Someone techie could maybe pick that up, but that was all that I wanted to say. Thank you.
Remember, you can go ahead and put comments in Slido, and we'll pick them up. I just wanted to follow up the personal touch that Claire commented on. I think is really something we heard. It suggests that if we use AI tools to help inform editors about better recruitment, better people to talk to and what to talk to them about, that should not be turned into an email that just automatically gets sent. that will very quickly have the wrong effect. And at least most of the journals in the room felt it would be counterproductive and not the way we want to approach prospective authors. They already get enough of those emails from ResearchGate and so on. There was, as Claire said, really good discussion about the biases, and that if you use your current approach to train the AI, it basically inherits your biases. That's what it's supposed to do, and so those need to be examined. We have two questions coming in from Slido, and if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll get you a microphone. The first question, Matt's question, does Meta want to be a service provider or does it have a wider mission? This is one that we asked Meta to comment on, and people didn't entirely find the answer satisfactory, in that it seemed they want to the mission. Meta is, by the way, so it's a company that was purchased by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative a little over a year ago, and that changed them entirely from a small for-profit located in Toronto. They've now relocated to the San Francisco Bay Area, where they've created their own housing bubble by having 30 people move to the Bay Area at once. Their mission is to accelerate scholarly research, and from the standpoint, why are they interested in publishing? They believe that accelerating publishing will do that. So that's why they are the main funder behind bioRxiv, and because they believe preprints accelerate research because they accelerate communication. They believe that by helping publishers better understand their own work, to be able to see it, to be able to see trends and to anticipate trends, that they will be helping publishers accelerate communication. By helping you find reviewers for papers, they will be helping accelerate. So they see themselves as a service provider, but to a very broad set of publishers. And so what we've tried to do by engaging them as a HighWire partner is have them focus on understanding the needs of our types of publishers, you folks, rather than the very largest publishers or very, very small publishers. And your needs, as many of you are society publishers or publish on behalf of societies, it's pretty important to get focused on that. So your role in that is to provide feedback to them on the tools that they are developing and on which tools they should develop. So part of the role of this workshop was to get Meta better informed about what editors actually wanted, as opposed to what Meta thought. Like a lot in Silicon Valley, they think they know better. Of course, you never hear that from HighWire. We have to ask. And editors were pretty persuasive in giving us some answers. For example, emerging topics. That was very clearly on the minds of editors. And that's a key area we're working on now with Meta in this experiment that I described. Let's see, Ellen's question, Meta holds webinars in which they introduce these tools to publishers and get feedback. If you want to be on the list to be informed about the workshops, the webinars, I'm sorry, just email me and I will get you in touch with them. They'll be doing a new one for the rollout of version 2 of their publisher dashboard. If you'd like access to your publisher dashboard, let me know or let your account manager know, and we'll get you into their dashboard program. Question on the AI aspect as distinct from standard online services. This is a good question. As I said, I wasn't going to be very religious about this because, in fact, the editors were not. They just wanted help. And particularly in horizon scanning and emerging topics, it's a very clear AI area, essentially recognizing patterns and extrapolating on patterns of emergence. That's part of what is close to the wheelhouse of AI. Obviously, if we were doing visual recognition and so on, if we were to produce tools that helped scan images to report problem images, those would probably be AI-based, because image recognition, image understanding is a big part of AI, especially in Silicon Valley, where we're all seeing the autonomous vehicles driving around. These are sort of home base for AI. Some of the things where you're doing more traditional work, like what's it? Trying to think of a good example. Well, reporting on market share, today's market share. That's really data visualization. That isn't artificial intelligence at all. But doing other kinds of work like Stat Reviewer, that is an AI-based tool. And I can't tell you about its algorithms, but if you're interested, we can certainly, a product group could talk to them as a possible partner, perhaps already is. Any other questions? So if you're interested in this topic in general, or have suggestions on future workshops, I would love to hear from you, and we'll keep in touch if you let me know that you're interested. Thank you.